welcome. Sorry for the early start. 9 o'clock on Saturday morning is not my favorite time, but I was trying to find a time that we could get some people from around the world here, and I don't know where everybody is, so maybe we've accomplished that. I hope so. So welcome to the video workshop. Tom Collier is the official coordinator for this thing, but he's building a house, so I had forgotten what volunteering was like, and I accidentally volunteered for this. So Craig Beasley and I'll be making a presentation here to start with, and Dennis Davenport's then going to pick up and give some thoughts of his on the same thing. So we're talking about stability and stabilization today, and they're actually two different things. I want to make a distinction. My definition is stability is what you try to get out in the field, however you can get a stable image in the field, and stabilization is what you try to do to the data if you didn't achieve that, what you wanted to do. So we'll concentrate on the last part of it, but of doing it in post-processing in Davinci Resolve 16. But we're going to do a little intro as well to kind of remind everybody what we're fighting here. So we'll talk about external stabilization in the field with hardware, camera features as well. And then Davinci Resolve, and I'll do a little demo in Davinci, and then we'll have a few tricks and tips on one particular clip, and then Dennis is going to show more of his tricks and tips and philosophy on the whole thing, and then Q&A. Once again, though, anytime you can just speak up and interrupt, and happy to stop and answer questions. Well, so the way I think about it is that this is not really a new topic. In fact, it's kind of goes back to the very beginning of photography, when they had very slow camera in terms of ISO. They had to have a long exposure time. That's something that's come back in style, by the way, the long exposure, but we're not going to talk about that. But you can see in this old photograph, people are moving, and it's not really a focus problem. It's a stability problem of the subject. And I got introduced to this pretty early on. Here's one of my 2006 photos many cameras ago, you can tell. And in this photo, everything was moving. So many cameras ago, there was no stability available. So you had to get everything still. And we'll talk about how things have improved. The thing is, though, it's different in video from still images. Out of focus bothers everyone. Blurry images bothers everyone. But there's something really jarring about a video that is unstable. And this is probably jumping around a little bit. I'll let it run for a second, see if it can. But you can see this is shaky video, and there are a few things that destroy your attention more in video. You're sitting there thinking, "Oh my God, I wish you could hold the camera still," instead of looking at what the video is you're trying to show. You've lost the battle already, and so it's extremely important, and this is what we want to try to make better. So like I said, in the beginning of photography, it was everything, and it still is. And even early on in photography, they were looking at ways to solve this problem. So here's a photograph from 1863, as you can see. They've got the cameras on a table here, basically. They got this guy, I don't know if these had little sharp things that went in the back of his neck or whatever, but it was designed to hold his head still while they took the picture. So the first stability devices they had were in fact tables, and this is an interesting one from about around the mid-1800s. And you can see they got smart enough to put it on a table, but they put a couple of wheels on there so that it was easy to roll around, move around the studio. And it's interesting, they were already looking at composition features. The table could tilt, as you can see. So unlike us trying to shoot up, these guys were actually shooting down a little bit on their subject. This was all for portrait photography, I'm sure. And it didn't really change much for a long time. After 100 years, you can see here's Ansel Adams still in 1953. He's got his tripod out there somewhere out in the West, but it's not much different from what they had in the mid-1800s. Pretty much still the same thing, and it still hasn't changed much today. But let me just point out to begin with that it's a matter of fashion, really, or art maybe, in video, because now we've come full circle. And if you watch the vloggers and modern indie films or something, it's all the rage to do handheld. And so when you see one of these romantic millennial love story kind of things where they're shooting people, they're holding the camera by hand, and it's got some movement. And so I thought this was really funny because actually you can now introduce instability into your video in Davinci Resolve. So over in the FX pane, you can choose camera shake, and it's got more parameters than you could believe you would possibly need. So you can spend endless time getting just the right kind of shake on your camera. And by the way, look over here, they're all keyframes, so you could really go to town on that if you wanted to. But we're not going to do that. We're the old school. We're trying to take the shaking out of our video. So go play with that if you like. Today, there's lots of options for tripods. There's just all kinds of things out there, and those are for still and for video. And of course, the video with all the handheld craze that we have right now, there's all kinds of devices out there that you can use to somewhat stabilize your video and still have it handheld. The bad news on that is for underwater, none of these are going to help you out, except maybe this little Gorilla Joby up here, whatever it is. I've actually taken one of those underwater. That was Betsy's main go-to tripod for a while. So you can do something like that. You just have to be prepared. It may rust after a few years, but they're so cheap you just buy another one. But the good news is there is stability hardware now available for underwater. So just a few years ago, there were a few tripods out there, but not much else. And of course, we're an ambitious and creative bunch. So by this time, there's all kinds of stuff that you can buy to try to help you stabilize underwater. And it's surprising how much money you can actually spend on one of these things. I won't go into that, but it's a wide range of costs. And my favorite one on here is this one in the lower right-hand corner, which is a little 2-minute tutorial. This guy figured out how to make himself a somewhat of a tripod by spending about $4. And he cheated a little bit because he had a little GoPro frame already, so he didn't have to buy that. And I think he had the lock line arms there. But then he bought a little plumbing fitting and a clamp and got just the right size to go onto his housing. So I think that's really cool. I'm thinking of making one myself. And of course, he also stuck the little gorilla thing on the back, which he didn't include. So, okay, it's not $4, but I'm guessing you could get there for 25 or so. Some of it is getting more politically incorrect. Some films like these are going to one day pictures like this where you're kneeling on the sand, already kind of going in that direction, politically incorrect in some environments, and you gotta watch that kind of stuff. And this looks, Dennis, I didn't know that you had posed for one of these photos before, but this looks like your rig with your old rig, sorry. So, okay, lots of stuff you can do there, but none of it is really going to be as effective as the stuff that you have online. And we'll talk about that. So, to tripod or not, I just thought I'd put a little slide up here about this. It's not a foregone conclusion that you should just put a tripod on your camera and just take it on every dive. For example, if you're going to go out and be in the blue water and try to film whale sharks, why would you, put 25 pounds more stuff on your camera and slow you down and so some places you just don't need it, but it's the best stability tool for places where you do have trouble. So particularly macro, muck, bottom dwellers, low current situations, anything that is a nice stable object and your camera movement is going to be your main concern in this, it's a great solution. The cons, it can be hard to get stable. It can be hard to find a spot with the subject that you want to get your legs down. The current and the reef and the fact that many places you just won't have support for the subject in the way you want to frame it. Cost is a consideration, and weight and transporting it on your trip is also a kind of a big deal. The more stuff you take, and it takes time to set up. The best way to dive with a tripod is to find 2 or 3 other people who have tripods and don't care about moving very much, and You know, that way you won't piss off the rest of the diving group while you're fooling with your tripod and you know, taking time filming the subject and so on. It can make diving difficult. I mean, if you're having trouble in a really heavy current, we ran into this out in Komodo, where some really vicious currents. We just ended up leaving the cameras on a few of the dives. And so you add a tripod onto that, then you're really maybe going to be challenged. My main concern on it is I've missed so many shots in my life just from being turned the wrong way, looking the wrong way, not having my camera, you know, set the way I want it. I can't get a focus. I miss all kinds of stuff that way. And if I'm focusing on my tripod and taking time on that, then I'm probably going to miss a lot of other opportunities. So there's a trade-off there. You just got to make your mind up what you want to do. And then there's another interesting thing I'll talk about at the very end, which is that even if the camera is stable, you've only stabilized the camera. The subject may not be cooperating with you. So I'm not going to argue one way or the other. This is kind of a religious topic in a way. There are people who are just perfectionists and won't, you know, keep a clip unless it's absolutely perfect, and they're going to use a tripod and they're going to film the same subject 5 hours in a day until they get it right. That's not my style of diving, but you know, it is for some people. So I'm not being judgmental here. I use a tripod sometimes. Betsy uses it most of the time, so we don't talk about it too much. Well, so here I've taken that same shaky video I showed you a minute ago, and I've just run it, the same one, handheld. By the way, this was a 120 millimeter equivalent. It's the 60 millimeter Olympus lens, and it has stabilized a lot of the shaky video, and it hasn't taken care of everything though. It's not going to fix my poor panning here, where I'm just kind of twisting my body in a, you know, non-uniform way. So it's by no means perfect, and so just a word on what is actually going on there. We're not going to talk much about it, but it's pretty common now on mirrorless cameras to have an IBIS system, in-body image stabilization, and most of them are 5-axis now. So basically, it has some sensors that tell you how the motion of the camera is occurring, and then it has some little motors or gyros or something to move the sensor around to counteract the motion of the camera. And this one typically does it in 5 axes. So you've got X and Y, so up and down. You have 3 rotational axes, which are we'll call rotation for the one coming out of the Z plane here. And these others you can call pitch and yaw after the airplane terminology, if you like. We'll just call these perspective because that's what the software calls them. You might notice one thing is that they don't have anything on the Z axis here, which would be kind of an in and out motion or a zoom kind of motion. And the curious thing is that the software actually has the capability of analyzing that axis as well. So that's one little difference. So to kind of summarize that, you've got hardware devices. I didn't mention this, optical image stabilization. That's really the first in-camera thing that came along. I remember when Sony came out with their steady shot on my video camera back in the 90s, and I thought that was like magic. But it moves the optical elements in the lens. And again, this is kind of religion. They've been arguing about this stuff for more than 20, 25 years. IBIS didn't come along until 2012, really, so the arguments really started about which is better. And the answer is both of them have their limitations, and they've actually added a third capability in a lot of cameras now, which is a digital in-body camera stabilization. And so on some cameras, you don't have to choose. If you've got a stabilized lens, you can use it. You can turn on IBIS, and you can turn on the digital stability in the camera at the same time. I'm not going to talk about the in-camera digital stabilization, mainly because I don't know much about it. You can't get much information out of the camera manufacturers on what they actually do. They just call it digital in-camera stabilization. But I think they, again, have some sensors that tell you how the camera's moving, and then they just read off a different part of the sensor. They don't try to move the sensor, but they put a crop on the sensor to make a border so that they can they can read off from a little bit different part from the center of the sensor. I don't think they can use software to do the kind of analysis that we're going to do in post-processing because it's just too much computation, but I'm not ruling it out. They just don't tell you. So anyway, after you do all of this stuff, if you're still not stable, then that's where we move to the software. And by the way, I've heard people kind of, this is a bad pun, kind of diss the DIS, diss the DIS. I have not seen any deleterious effects of using that, other than it, if you think it's bad, it puts a little bit more of a zoom, it crops the sensor. So I just leave it turned on because I have not noticed anything I can attribute to that being active. So here I've taken that same video and I've also run it through Davinci Resolve. So it's maybe a little hard to tell. There's more of a zoom on it, so the image is a little bit larger, but it has taken out a little bit more of the jump. So that's about the best we could do at the time. So I think the next part, I just want to give you a little cartoon of what's going on in the software, because I think if you understand the geometry maybe and a little bit of the physics, I'm not going to, don't worry, no equations, it'll help you understand how to operate the different stability options in the in the software. So let's take a really simple cartoon example. I've got frame 1 and frame 2. And obviously, between frame 1 and frame 2, Betsy's jostled me going for a glass of champagne, so it's moved in the image. And obviously, we don't think that that was supposed to happen. So how's that going to work? Well, the first thing we're going to do is try to identify the two images and line them up. So, well, look, I cheated here. I shifted one and rotated it, so I know that an opposite shift and a rotation is going to put them back in line. So I've done that here. I've rotated frame 2 and then I've shifted it as well. And so now the image is aligned, but now you can see immediately a little bit of the downside. They don't align perfectly. And so you're left with some areas of both frames that are not going to be in that common image that you recorded. And we're going to see this in some films a little bit later on. So that's one of the problems that you have to sort out here. And that's where the algorithm comes in. So the first thing you do is figure out what's the stable part of your image. How do I need to change the images to make them coincide, or at least make them look smooth? And then I'm going to crop that and get rid of anything that's blank. And then I'm going to have to zoom it back up to fill the frame of my video. And so this is basically what's going to be happening some way or other in all of the stabilization algorithms. And so, you know, finally then in this particular example, what I come out with in this case is that frame 1 and 2 look exactly the same. But of course, if I'd had something in the background here in frame 1 that was actually supposed to be moving, somebody walking across the screen, then it would still be in the new frame 1 and 2, only just magnified a little bit because we've cropped and zoomed in. So pretty simple to talk about. You got to think a little bit now about how I cheated on this. I know what the images are here. I could look at it and say, oh, there's a champagne bottle and some glasses, and I want those to be stable. But you got to think that nothing in the camera knows what you actually want to be the background or to be stable. So it's got to do this through a numerical analysis. And this is where I'm going to stop on the physics and stuff. It gets pretty complicated, I think is a fair thing to say. In fact, it's an area of active research right now. I thought I'd put a web page up here. This is a company you can look up. Maybe you can't read it. It's Digital Design Corporation, and you can just look at this and see all the areas that they've got IP on. I mean, image stabilization is just one of them down here. So this is big business, and if you think about it, probably the roots of this whole problem come out of probably the military taking aerial photographs and trying to analyze them automatically and find out, you know, what things in the frame have moved. Like, did the missile silo trucks move from the last satellite image or not. And so the spooks are all doing this. It's industrial, robotics, machine learning, AI. Everything is all going in this direction. So this is how robots learn to see, how to make their movements. So we're not going to go into that. I just want you to know that it's an active problem. So in fact, the recent papers 2018-19, you'll find new research on this. So for my part of this thing, the real data, I'm going to just use one clip here. Well, actually, I'm going to cheat. I have one other little image at the very end. But this is a kind of a representative little clip. I've cut it down to about 7 seconds, and here you're looking at it just with no post-processing stabilization. Of course, I had the in-field stuff turned on. So you can imagine how bad it would have looked if I hadn't had that. And of course, I had no tripod. I'm out in current. This is up on the side of some sponges and stuff, so I don't think a tripod really would have helped me in this situation anyway. So what we're going to do now is just apply the out-of-the-box standard default. If you go in and click on stabilization, you'll get this screen, and you click the stabilizing button, and you'll see these. We'll talk about these lines a little bit in a minute. But I just took the default stabilization and ran it, and okay, it looks a little bit more stable. Maybe I still don't like it a whole lot, and that's what we're going to talk about. What do you do if you want to do some more from just the default? I'm not going to try to give any kind of tutorial on the full Davinci Resolve thing. It's way too much beyond the scope. But I just want to show those of you who maybe aren't familiar with Davinci Resolve, but maybe you do know one of the other nonlinear editors, like Final Cut or it's a bunch of them out there, Avid, Premiere, and so on. So you have your clips you're going to work on. This is called a media pool. I've just taken this flatworm thing and I put it down here on the timeline. I put 2 copies of it because we may want to work on 2 of them. And this is your video. And one of the cool things about Davinci Resolve 16 that I'll point out for those who are more familiar, every editor has something like this. If I come down and highlight a click on this clip, and it'll turn red in Davinci, and that means it's selected. And now if I click up here on the inspector tab, that's going to open up a window that lets me do a bunch of stuff with this clip. And I think what I'll do now is I'm not going to be using the media pool, so I'm just going to make some more real estate so that things are a little bit larger maybe. And so there are various options in here. I won't talk about it much, except I want to point out that, look here, in the edit panel, which is where we are. We're down here in the edit panel. It has a stabilization tab right there in the edit panel. You'll see in a minute that we used to always have to go over to the color panel because that's where stabilization lived. Well, now you can double click on that and you can see the parameters that you can choose. This is a basic panel that lets you choose these. And so I could do stabilization right here. I'm not going to use that because your information here is limited. You can do the stabilization, but you'll see if we take the trouble to go over to the color panel that there's a lot more information. So let's do that. I've got this one selected, and let's put it over there so we see the image. Now go to the color panel, and let me show you how to find the stabilization on the color panel. And let me close the effects panel here as well. And so that way we'll get the most real estate. Well, down here about the middle way, there's things that should look familiar. There's the curves, there's an eyedropper, there's a thing here we won't talk about. This is called the tracker panel, and that's where the stabilizer lives, in the tracker panel. But over here, it's a little tricky. You've got a drop-down menu here under Window. I click on that one. Now I've got 3 choices. And so there's where the stabilizer is hiding. So I have to go and find the stabilizer. There it is. And now I'm free to stabilize that clip. So comes up with the default parameters. We'll talk some more about these in a bit, but let me just show you this drop-down menu here where it says perspective. These are the different kinds of stabilization that you can choose. So let's start at the bottom here with translation. Translation is just what you might think it would mean. It's the X and Y frame that I showed you. So it's only going to track and it's only going to try to find movements that are side to side and up and down. The next one up is similarity. And you have to do a little work to find out what that means. But what it means is you've got X and Y, and you've got rotation in there as well. And you've got that other one that I said was not in the camera, which they call a zoom parameter. So it's also looking for movement in and out, zooming in and out. And to be honest with you, I don't see very much of that happening on any of the videos that I take, but maybe yours are different. And the final one here is the whole kitchen sink. This is perspective, where they take all four of the ones that I just talked about, and they throw in pitch and yaw as well. And it's called perspective because the first four that I talked about are what they call affine transforms. And that means when you do one of these things, that parallel lines stay parallel. So if I have parallel lines in my picture and I shift it one way or the other, they stay parallel. Same with rotation, same with zooming. Perspective, no. If I rotate around the center of the camera axis one way or the other, the parallel lines will now have perspective, and the part of it that's further away from me, the lines will go closer together, and of course the ones near me are further apart. So you can imagine that complicates the situation quite a bit in your searches. You have to now look for elements that are subject to this perspective. So I don't want to talk about it, but it is much more complicated. Okay, what about these other parameters? Well, smooth. We'll see that in a minute. Smooth, really all of these are kind of a strength parameter, and we'll see what they mean. But smooth means how much of the smooth camera movement do I want to keep in my picture. So that means I'm taking out the really high frequency jittery stuff with this smoother. And if I shift it all the way up to 1, that says you make that as stable as you possibly can. Even take out that low frequency movement. The way I understand strength is it takes both of the things going on here with cropping and smooth and then just scales them back a little bit. We're just going to leave strength all the way up. We want all the stabilization. The cropping ratio is a limiter on the smoother. Basically, it says whatever you do with the smooth thing, don't crop more than this amount. So this, it's saying you can do a 50% crop up to a 50%, but if your smoothing parameter is going to try to make you crop more than that, then don't do it. Cut it back. So you can change this one. To be honest with you, I almost never fool with that because I don't find it being limited very much. And so I usually work with just the smooth parameter, which is what I'll do today. A couple of other things you need to be aware of. There's a zoom parameter here, which is going to turn the zoom on and off, and we'll see that in a second. And another one that's nice to know is up in the left-hand corner here, the bypass stabilization, which lets you turn it on and off and see the difference there. So let's just go ahead and do it here. Enough of that talking. Let's just run a stabilization. And you can see right away, this is pretty computer intensive. I've got a pretty powerful computer. It's only 7 seconds of data, but it is 4K, and so it takes a little bit of time to compute it. And so now, okay, we got these curves here, and I can move the slider down here, and if I look at the little colored numbers down here, they correspond to the colored curves, and probably you don't care too much because nobody's told you yet what these curves actually are, and they don't actually show up in this screen. So it's kind of a mystery until you go a little further. So let's just do that right now because it gives me a chance to complicate the scene even a little bit more. There's actually a second way to stabilize here, which is called the classic stabilizer. So watch closely now. I'm going to go up here to the top of the stabilizer window, not the drop down menu, but over here to the right, the 3 dots has a drop down, and it's got all kinds of stuff that you can do in here. But near the bottom is the classic stabilizer. That's what was available before, I think, Davinci 14 or something like that. But anyway, back in 12, I think this is what they had. So let's click on that and see what it looks like. And now some of those colors make sense. The green is pan, blue is tilt. Those are just X and Y. I don't know why they've taken, it's a little bit misleading actually. The zoom is exactly what it sounds like, and rotate is what it sounds like. So now if you ever forget what the green and the pink and the blue mean, you can go to the classic panel and have a look. I'm going to turn that back off because we've done a stabilization, which by the way was lost because we moved to a different stabilizer. So we'll restabilize again here. Just takes a second. And again, all the default parameters.
Craig, while we're waiting, can you maybe just explain a little bit, in case people don't know Davinci Resolve, just tell them what it is and why y'all use that particular program?
Sure. Well, Tom is responsible for that since he let us know that this thing was free. It's a full nonlinear editor and actually a full movie production program, because you have all the editing tools here. We're in the color page that shows you all of the color correction tools, all kinds of stuff you can do in here, special effects up here. It has a tab called Fusion. We're not going to talk about Fusion today because that's a very complicated thing. It has Fairlight, which is the audio module. So I can do all my soundtrack stuff. I can even record in this, and it's a full 32-track digital editor as well. And finally, the deliver page here is how you get stuff out of here. It lets you render. One of the nice things is it has a lot of the stuff that people have to buy extra plugins for, like, you know, if you want a good stabilizer in Final Cut Pro, you probably should buy a plugin. The one that comes with it is not all that great. So there's a lot of stuff in here, and especially if you pay another $300 one-time fee, they call it the studio version that has a lot of bells and whistles. Good. We've got it stabilized now with the default parameters. We'll just run it. And this is what I showed you before, and it looks pretty good. But I'm seeing some things that they're still moving around a little bit that I don't like. If you look right in the area I'm pointing here with this little hump where the camera movement was not quite following the guy. I thought he was going down, but he didn't. So I'd like to see if I can get it a little bit smoother. So I'm going to crank the smoothing parameter up. In this case, I think I looked at about 0.8. Give that a try. Now, when you change one of these parameters, you always need to go back and hit the stabilize button, because it's going to recompute all of that stuff and change the zoom on it and everything else. So now you saw it zoom a little bit more. And let's check if we've managed to smooth out this little low frequency thing. So it was taking out the little high frequency jitter stuff in here, but it had this big hump. So let's just take a look at that. And now I like that a little better, because when he comes along, he doesn't seem to go up and down anymore. He pretty much looks like he's crawling straight on up. So, okay, I think I kind of like that. I added some more power to it. Well, let's try to get more aggressive. You know, if a little power is a good thing, maybe a lot of power is a whole lot better. There's a thing here called camera lock, which is just what it sounds like. If you read the manual, it says it tries to make it look like it was on a tripod. So, all right, that sounds great. Camera lock. Hey, nice thing about camera lock is, look, there's no parameters to choose anymore. That's great too. Just grade them all out. So I could still choose perspective or something, but I'm gonna keep it on that. Well, so let's hit stabilize, and now it's got to. Oh my God, what happened? Well, the zoom, it found so much movement in there that it's totally zoomed out of the frame. So, how can I see what's going on here? Well, I can uncheck the zoom box, and let's have a look. There's, you know, I didn't understand for a long time, why did they have this zoom? Why would you want to uncheck the thing? Well, there's a lot of information you can get by watching this video when it's not zoomed. So let's just run it and watch a little bit and see what this guy is trying to do. So one of the things that you'll notice is a lot of the movement is up and down, side to side. but not all of it. If you notice, there's some places where the two axes, like right in here, suddenly they're not perpendicular anymore. That means that the 3D perspective has had an effect here. So it's actually warping the image as well as shifting it around and rotating it and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. And it did so much of it that it had to zoom so much that it was totally useless. Well, good grief. What should I do? Well, first thing you might say is like, whoa, forget that. I'm going to go back to where I was. It looked a whole lot better before. So let's just go back here and say, you know, I noticed in that moving around there, the perspective seemed to be warping the thing. So maybe that's my problem. What if I go down here and I try to keep the same parameters? Let's get away from that perspective thing. Maybe I don't want to warp the thing. Let's try the translation. So we're going to do that. And now, since I changed the mode, it's going to have to recompute. So there's a little punishment if you want to do that. And we'll just wait a couple of seconds here. Okay. Well, you saw it back off a little bit, so that meant it's doing a little less stabilization, but let's run it now. And I'll let it go through a couple of times here, and you can see if you can see what I see. I see a little bit of wobbling going on right in there. Did you see that? Watch when we're at about 1/4 of the way through in here. You see how it wobbles? Now, it wasn't doing that before. So wait a minute. I clicked the translation to try to get rid of this warping effect, but now it's worse. So the answer to that is that I did indeed have perspective instability in this image. I needed the perspective to take it out. When I took the perspective out and just had translation, then it's showing a warping effect, which was actually what I took in the field. So it's a little bit tricky sometimes, and so you need to be careful and try the parameters out and be really critical about it. So I'm going to show you one other thing about this, and I'm going to go back to the one that was a total disaster, and we're going to put it back on perspective, which was the best stabilization. And I know it zoomed like crazy and looked like crap, but you know, we're going to talk about that a little bit. The one thing that I think is not so smart in all of this is how it does the zoom at the end of the process. And you know, the problem is, again, it doesn't know what image I'm looking for. So it doesn't know that I like this little guy here, and for him to be crawling up is just fine. And it doesn't know that, you know, over here he's up near the top of the frame anyway, so I might want to actually move him a little bit. So what you can do, once you've turned the zoom off, you can try to implement the zoom feature in a manual way. So I've got all the stability in there. It knows how to move the image around. Now I'm just going to go back and try to see if I can transform the image in a little bit smarter way than Davinci was able to do it. So I'm here in the edit page again, and the reason I'm going to do that is that there's this little transform box up here in the upper right-hand corner. So we scroll through this a few times here, and you can see, okay, it's really not doing much over here. I didn't need to zoom this thing at the beginning very much at all. And it only gets really kind of nasty right over here at the very end. So what if I go and I'm gonna kind of keyframe this thing. So I want to start my zoom out in a pretty minimal way, and just zoom it enough to try to take care of that very beginning part. So let me just check that now. Was I able to do that? Yeah, well, actually there I needed maybe a little bit more, but I'm going to zoom it more later on, so we can leave it like that. And let's come over and find the worst part of this thing, which is like right at the end over here. Yeah, that's probably the worst. Well, I'm going to have to zoom a whole lot more to get that done. And so I'm going to zoom up, but now I'm going to also move the image down. Now this is probably something it can't do so well because it doesn't know what my feature on here is, and it doesn't know where I want it to be. So how about that? I've managed to get him back in the center of the frame. Not nearly as much zoom as you saw in the first one, But it's easier if I just go back here, just for illustration, I can make it 1.2. That's probably going to take care of it. There you go. So right at the very end, obviously I didn't have the keyframe at the very end, so I could take care of that. That's the idea, though, is that you can analyze this thing and then do your own zoom as you like. And that can be a very powerful tool. And just to give you a flavor for that, I've actually done that in an even more complicated way. If I come into the classic stabilizer, first thing you notice is it doesn't have the perspective. So that's kind of a drag on this. I'm not going to be able to use it on this clip probably because the perspective was important. But I can go into an interactive mode and I could now see the points that it wants to choose. And I could say, you know what? I don't want you to choose any points on this guy because he's supposed to be moving. So let me select that. Let me get rid of those points. And let me come over here and select these and get rid of this point. You'll see in a moment this is a little bit futile in a way. And then I say, well, you know what? The reef is the important thing. So let me tell him to put a bunch of points down here. So I'll do that and I'll click on that. He's going to populate that. And maybe I want more up here. Click on this guy to populate it. I could populate some other places too. Anyway, once I've done that, I've got these points now and I can stabilize here. It's not as easy to stabilize here. You've actually got to track first. So I'm going to do the tracking. There we go. Now you see it insists on adding some points back on his body anyway. They love the contrast of those white spots on the purple. You just can't make him get rid of them. But that's the idea now. Once I've got the tracking done on exactly the points I want, then I could go back to the edit page and I could tailor the zoom to fit that particular image and tracking. A couple of other things here where I'll show you the result of actually doing that, where I did it all by hand. And I'm not sure this is the best result you can get because actually it doesn't have perspective. So you need to, there's other ways of doing this where you can also track it individually and get the perspective in it. And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. But the way I'm looking at it now, I like the camera lock best with the manual tracking rather than choosing the reef and the points. But here's one that didn't work either. And so here, this was a tough problem because I was moving, no tripod. I was up in the water because this guy was up on a piece of algae. And the subject is blowing around, although you can't tell it right now. He was moving up and down around in the frame as well. So instead, I said, you know what? The thing I want to be still is this moving subject. And so I tracked him and told it to stabilize on that and then did the zooming in a manual fashion as well. So sometimes you have to do this to get the best result. Most of the time not. I don't want to scare you off. Most of the time you can just play with that smooth parameter and it works like a charm. I know this has gone by fast. Dennis is going to say some of it again, which is really good because it never hurts to hear it twice. But if you want a good thumbnail, you know, just a little reference card on this, go to this website here, motionarray.com. They've got a very good little tutorial. It's aimed at Final Cut Pro, but you'll recognize the same parameters in Davinci Resolve if you go look there. Of course, they're trying to sell you some plugins at the bottom, so be aware of that. You know, my final thoughts, kind of like stills, get close, get closer, but then back off because you need to have some extra room in your video to do this stabilization and the zoom. I don't know how many clips I've had to throw away because I had it framed perfectly, it wasn't stable, and I didn't have enough room to stabilize it and do a zoom. So that's one of the hardest things to remember. Give yourself more room. Use a pointer stick for stability if you can. Try to stay out of surges. I mean, even with a tripod, surge for video is a disaster. If you can, get facing into the current. It's easiest to get yourself stable, I think. You can't always do that. And I use all of the stuff I can get, just throw the whole thing at it and then do it in post as well. I talked about tripods. Yeah, they're great, but I'll just emphasize, watch out for the reef. There's some places where they won't even let you set up a tripod anymore. So that's, you know, you may not want to dive there if you're shooting video. Another thing you can do if you don't have a tripod and you can't use one is to try to use a smooth motion in your filming. So put some motion to the camera itself. That sort of masks the instabilities. If you're moving around, showing different perspectives on the object, he doesn't look like he's moving so much. Beat the hell out of the post-processing parameters, because that can really make a big difference. Dynamic corrections, I spent a lot of time on that. Yeah, it's important. Shoot 4K, because this zooming thing that you're going to have to do in stability, you know, is going to eat up pixels. So typically, if your output is going to be 1080p, shooting in 4K lets you do a lot of zooming and still have all original pixels for the final image. And then let me just say, there's other software options that you can buy, plugins and so on. There's other stability. From what I've read, though, I don't think many of them are very much better probably than what's already in Davinci. I think it's got some pretty hefty capabilities sitting right there. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, introduce Dennis, take it away, and we'll both be available for questions after he's finished. Thanks a lot for listening, guys.
Hey, Craig, I got a question for you before we go to Dennis. You said shoot 4K. If we shoot 4K, does that not preclude us from using the stabilization on the camera?
No, it did on earlier models. Some models of Olympus, it does. On the ones we have now, the EM1, you can use all of the stability. In some cameras, when you shoot 4K, you don't get some of the options. Like our Sony, for example, does not give you the digital stabilization if you shoot 4K. So it just depends on the camera, I think. But the Olympus EM1 definitely does.
We're shooting GoPro.
Well, GoPro is only a digital stabilization anyway, so that I think that would be fine, yeah. But I don't have a GoPro, so I don't know.
Okay.
If you're going to be using, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. If you're using the GoPro, if you're shooting in 4K, there's no stabilization available, but you can use the full 4K frame, which gives you a lot of real estate to do a lot of post-processing stabilization. Otherwise, if you use the 2.7K on the GoPro, you have about, still have quite a bit of real estate there for it to do the stabilization in camera.
Yeah,
still afterwards, you still have some extra room in there for post-processing of your 2.7K video.
Yeah, and the thing to think about is you'd like to have one of the cameras that has the crop like Dennis is talking about, and the Olympus will do that in 4K. It crops the image, so you see it's a little bit zoomed more than the lens would just do, and it provides that border. And the nice thing about being able to do it in the camera as opposed to doing it in software is that those are real pixels that it's using in the camera. In software, you have to zoom your thing up and lose part of the image. So you get more pixels if you can do it in the camera.
Do we have any questions? Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get started a little bit. Hopefully this will give you some more things to think about when it comes to stabilizing. I'm not going to be going over all of the stuff that Craig has already covered so well. I will say that my thought processes were going along basically the same thing that his was doing. perhaps not quite as in much detail. But my whole presentation is going to be really predicated on showing some examples and talking a little bit about what I do in my own work process for stabilizing my video. Now, just a few points to reemphasize. Don't make your audiences suffer. Obviously, when you have technical glitches in your video, it's going to capture people's attention, and it's going to wander away from what you're really trying to do, is to tell a story and to show some really pretty pictures. People start thinking about the process and the problems and not focusing on what you're trying to do. And as Craig said, almost everything that we do underwater, because of the surge and the current and difficulties maintaining your balance, you're going to have to do some stabilization there. And as he said, the better you start, the better your end result. I like to think that if you back off a little bit, it gives you more room to work with in post-stabilization. It also makes things a little bit more stable for the very beginning, which says starting clips are better when you have good, you can work with them better if you get started. Use a tripod, trim the clips before you're stabilizing them, and then get after it. Use a wider lens or back off on your zoom. Here are the things that he's already talked about: perspective, similarity, translation, and the cropping, smooth, strength. All of these things are what I use. My preferences, okay? I use translation and similarity a lot, but I've gotten more and more into the perspective mode. I don't see the artifacts that I used to see with the perspective, and I think that maybe the algorithm has changed a little bit in the newer versions. But I've also been dealing with the manual tracking, which I think is ultimately going to be the one that's going to give us the most flexibility. It adds another element of time and difficulty, but the end result is what's important here. Okay, so here are just some examples that I put together. I hope that's not coming in too jittery, but this is a handheld version right here with no stabilization. And you can see, even though I was locked onto my subject, now I put it on a tripod. But you can see that on a tripod, everything is a lot more stable. Now, when I took the handheld and I stabilized it in post, you can see it did pretty good, but it also zooms in quite a bit, and sometimes I lose my subject. On tripod with maximum stabilization, I'm rock solid on my subjects. I'm not zoomed in very much, and all of my subjects stay in the frame. I'm going to just do a quick refresh so you can see that. Handheld, no stabilization. Moving around quite a bit. Put it on the tripod. Pretty darn good. Pretty solid. Now, when I do the stabilization of the handheld, I have to zoom in so much because there was so much motion. My subject gets out of the frame at times. And finally, the best of both worlds. On a tripod, good stabilization. Okay. Next one. Okay, now I have another same subjects right here where I've done the classic stabilization, but I'm doing it a little bit differently than what Craig did. Let's see. Okay, I have taken just 2 points on this that were common in all of the video track itself, and I've put those in there, and I said, I want this to stay in the frame, unmoving for the entire clip. But you can see that the black bars on the outside tell me that since I don't have zoom on, it's going to show the black bars. So I'll go ahead and run this. You can see that the 2 points are staying exactly where they are because I was moving around. The black bars are having to intrude into the frame. In order to get rid of the black bars, it's going to have to zoom in on my subject to be able to keep everything in there. So the next point, okay, now here I have it. I've got the handheld clip, classic stabilizer. I've selected 2 points, which are going to give me pan, tilt, zoom, and rotate. I put the zoom on so that the black bars are no longer in there, and this is what I have. You can see that the points that I selected keep it rock solid as far as where the camera is pointing, but because it's had to move in so much, my subjects are getting clipped off. Now here's, excuse me, I'm choking up a little bit. Here's a puffer, and I'm mid-water, and I'm taking a picture of it, and there wasn't a lot of current, but there was enough. And you're gonna see that I'm moving around. I've got him pretty well stabilized in the center of the image, but everything else is kind of moving around with it. At the end, you're going to see a little bit of motion right in there that's going to be difficult for the process to handle. So what I've done is that I have shown where I've used the cropping ratio of 0.9, which is very limiting. It's only giving a small portion of the frame to be able to move around. It doesn't have a lot of real estate to make corrections. So even though I'm using full smoothing here, I've really done everything all the way up. I have a limited range. You're going to see towards the end here, right here, I didn't have enough real estate to keep that last little jog out. Now, there's 2 ways to approach that. One is that I could have gone in and trimmed the clip beforehand and eliminated that, and it wouldn't have had to zoom quite so much. Or I could come back in and change the cropping ratio to a lower value, minimized it at 0.25. Now I've given it maximum real estate, and I've still got maximum smoothing. And I'm using translation here. Pretty locked in. You can see that I'm zooming in and out, but it's still got that puffer stable in the center, and there wasn't that last little jog towards the end of the frame. I just wanted to show you also, this is, if you look at the perspective on it, this was what the original was. This was where it zoomed in when I was using a crop ratio of 0.9, and it still had the jog towards the end that it couldn't take out. And this is where it takes a little bit more real estate because my cropping ratio is 0.25. It gives more room for it to run. And I don't see any difference when I go from translation on this one right here to perspective. The zoom factors are identical. And when I looked at them, there were very minor differences in the end result. The same thing for when I did it at the 0.25 ratio, cropping ratio translation versus cropping ratio on perspective. And that's basically my presentation right there, except for the fact that I have one little portion right here where showing the benefits of backing off. Here, I'm pretty stable, but I've doubled the speed so you can see the motion. Okay, watch how much motion you're seeing when I'm doubling the speed. You can see the jitteriness of it. even though it was a pretty well photographed video of those two morays. Now, if I go forward, I've now used maximum stabilization. I've given it a lot of real estate with a cropping ratio of 0.25, and my smoothing and my strength is maximum. I got zoom on. And so when I start on it, you're going to see that it is really locked in pretty well there. And since I still have enough real estate, having backed off here, I have another thing that I can do here. If I want to, I can use dynamic zoom and I can get this effect. I'm zooming in on them as we go throughout, getting closer and closer and closer. And it's all done. And that's pretty nice. I've got a stable video clip here of a couple of nice morays waving around in the current, and I've been able to zoom in on it because I was backed off enough to give me room to post stabilize and still move around in the frame with the dynamic zoom. And that's really it for me. Now let's have some questions. Let me stop share. Can you unmute everybody?
So how did you add the dynamic zoom?
The dynamic zoom is in the edit page. And when you do that, it's one of the special effects that show up on the right-hand side. I'm trying to remember. Craig, what do they call that?
Yeah, it's in part of the transform curve. But dynamic zoom, that's a particular way it gives you sort of two squares that you, or two rectangles, start with one and go to the second one. I would say what I did with the keyframes and the zooming is also a dynamic zoom. It's just what you're just doing it by hand, and you have more flexibility. It takes a lot more time, but yeah, the dynamic zoom goes from one rectangle to the other one.
Yeah, you have, let me just point out, I know that we're getting a little bit off track here, but dynamic zoom allows you to move. You can zoom in or you can zoom out. You have control of where you're zooming from and where you're zooming to, and how much zoom you're working with and how much zoom you don't want to use with it.
Hey, actually, I can show it on here, Dennis.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it's another one of these things in the inspector here. It's right here, dynamic zoom, and if I turn it on, then I have to go over here and tell it to show me the frames, but show the transform frames. So basically, they're lines right now, but you can drag them around.
No, not the transform frame, Craig. You need to have the
dynamic zoom
zoom on.
Yeah, okay,
right
so
there.
there's what he's talking about. The green one starts, so that's at the beginning of the clip, and the red one is at the end of the clip. So
you can reverse it.
You can drag these around, do whatever you like. And there's a drop down on how it does ease in, ease out, ease in and out. It's just kind of makes the transitions more cinematic. But yeah, that's a really handy way if you want to. So this would be starting with green and ending with red. That would be well, I could play the clip actually, couldn't I?
Yeah, just go ahead and do it.
So it's way zoomed in and then it zooms out. It does it automatically, which is what's really cool. To do that the way I was doing it with keyframes, you'd have to go over to the beginning and pick one. And so this is a really handy way. You can go the other direction, like Dennis said. You can put the red frame way down there, the green frame.
Well, Craig, over there you have the swap button.
Yeah, you can swap them.
Zoom, hit the swap button.
Yeah.
And it swaps in and out.
And you can move them around too. So, yeah.
A very useful feature.
Yep. I think Ken Burns uses that one a lot.
Mm-hmm.
On his still photos.
I think the takeaway on what we're trying to say today, what Craig has already said, is that you want to do the best you can to get good, stable clips to start with, and then you have a lot of options afterwards in post-processing to improve it and to utilize what you've already got in the can. Davinci Resolve is a very sophisticated program. As he said, that it's a full professional version. They give it away, or almost give it away, even for the studio version, because they're selling thousands and thousands of dollars of hardware to these people that are making commercials, videos for anything and everything. They want to get you hooked on the software, and then they want to sell you a bunch of expensive hardware.
So yeah, just to make the point, it's not just zooming. You can provide motion as well. So I just, while you were talking,
Absolutely.
Dennis, I was messing around with this thing. So let me play that, and you can see. So it kind of moves up on him as he goes up the thing. So there's all kinds of stuff, and it's really easy to do with this. And
Within DaVinci, you have a lot of control of things. For instance, you can play with speeds of your clips, moving them faster and slower, and you can ramp them. The same thing with where you want to follow things in using the tracker up at the top, a little bit further up, Craig. Not the tracker, but the
transform window.
Transform window.
Yeah, this is the one I was.
Basically, you're just putting points left to right, start to end, and you can move anywhere you want to within that thing.
Here's
really
pitch and
interesting.
yaw. You can do all this kind of stuff. You can
Zoom
rotate. Yeah. And if you screw it up, good to know the reset button.
It's a very sophisticated program. It does extract a pound of flesh trying to learn it, but there are thousands, it seems like, of YouTube videos out there with people that are trying to show you how to do it. They're doing it so fast oftentimes. Yeah.
A 3,000-page manual that
I think it's actually 3,600 pages.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah. No, that's the small one. This
is a good book.
That's just a guide to. That's not the manual. No, look, I mean, you do it incrementally. We're acting like we know a lot. We know zero compared to, it's like Photoshop. If you think you know something about Photoshop, we were watching Erin, what's Erin Quigley? She's holding some online Zoom meetings. Oh my God, what that woman can do in Photoshop, I couldn't even dream of, So there's a lot of stuff we don't even know what it is. For example, right. I mean, I'm going to be looking for, guinea pigs for the next thing. Now, Betsy said that she wants to talk at some point about the cut page, which is a whole new page in Davinci Resolve. I've used it once, and it seemed to be like a pretty good thing. Anyway, she said she wants to do a tutorial on it in one of our workshops, but she needs to learn how to do it first herself, which I think is a good idea. So.
I'm sorry that I wanted to apologize to everybody because Zoom doesn't treat the videos very well. They tend to be a little bit jerky because the transmission rates aren't really up to what we would like to see.
I wonder if there's any questions.
Any questions? Any more questions?
Is there any questions about something about oh, sorry. Just wondering if while we're sitting here in Davinci Resolve, if anybody has
Get closer to your microphone.
It's sticking in the page.
Could you guys hear that?
Oh, Betsy needs to get closer to the mic.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, she's just wondering if there's any questions about Davinci Resolve in general that people have, not just on the stability stuff while we're here, Not that we could necessarily answer them, but.
Stop sharing your screen.